I've mentioned before that I think that Theodore Roosevelt is one of our more colorful presidents. And what we have here is a little PowerPoint presentation of Theodore Roosevelt, and it's done with cartoons that were made of him in the period. And you can see right here, he was a cartoonist dream. He had that great big walrus mustache. He had those thick glasses, and he had those great big teeth with that huge smile. Like I say, he was a cartoonist dream. And if you remember our talk about Roosevelt, he became famous when he fought in the Spanish-American War. He came right home from that and became governor of New York. A couple of years after that, he was vice president. And, 6 months after becoming vice president, he became president. And so he was the governor of New York. William McKinley asked him to be his running mate. They won the election of 1900. He took office as vice president in 1901, but 6 months later, he is the president. And it all occurred after kind of a crazy man shot the president. And he was the youngest man ever to be in office, 42 years of age. A lot of people thought that the Congress would push him around, that he didn't have a lot of Washington insider experience. But the thing is he did just the opposite. He pushed them around, and he got the Congress to do what he wanted done. Here's a picture of him out hunting, and this is based on a true story. They were out hunting bears, and they didn't see any big adults, and this little bear cub wanders by, and they were trying to encourage him to shoot the bear cub, and he says, "No, I'm not going to do that. It's a little baby." And the story got out, and somebody actually made a little stuffed bear, and they called him the teddy bear. And so ever since, we have called stuffed bears teddy bears, after President Theodore or Teddy Roosevelt. One of the great things he did that has benefited us to this day is building the Panama Canal. And, Panama was actually a province of Colombia at the time, but every time he negotiated with the Colombians, they kept wanting more and more and more money. And so finally what he did was he sent secret agents into Panama, and they fomented a little revolution. And a couple of days later, Panama declares itself independence, and we recognize them, and we sign a treaty with them, allowing us to build the canal there. So it was quite a high price to build it, but it was a great thing. It has benefited, everybody in the Western Hemisphere, every single country, since the day we built it. Now, people thought that Wall Street would push Roosevelt around too. He's a Republican, and Republicans usually do what the Wall Street people want. But it was just the opposite there too. He got into Wall Street, and he broke up some really big companies that were too large for their own good, and he made them play by the rules. And so he was a real surprise. Here he is. He's getting the trusts of these big companies. He's taming them. For instance, he took Standard Oil Company, which was the only oil company in America. Everybody had to buy their gasoline from them. And he broke it up into 26 different companies that compete with each other today. And those places are like Texaco, Chevron, Shell, and so on. They all used to be just one big oil company, but Roosevelt wouldn't allow it. And so every time there were elections up, he just, beat everyone. And so these are all the other Republicans that wanted the nomination in 1904, but no, Roosevelt got it. People back in those days, they were dependent on the railroads. For instance, our little town of Worthington, the only way into and out of this place was the railroad. And so if you were a farmer and you wanted to sell your goods, they had to go out on the railroad train. If you're a merchant and you want to buy the stuff for your store, it had to come in on the railroad train. And the railroads used to really chisel people with their rates. They charged way too much. But Roosevelt got in there, and he brought them to heel, and they did what he wanted. And so we had regulation of the railroads after the time of Roosevelt. And again, he did this time after time to James J. Hill, to John D. Rockefeller of Standard Oil, to the railroads. He made them play by the rules and let them know they were getting a little bit too big for their pants. And when he decided to leave office in 1908, he had been president for almost 8 years. It was 7 years and about 6 months. and he kind of handpicked his own replacement. He decided that his friend William Taft would become the president, and this cartoon is him loading all his agenda onto William Taft's back. And Roosevelt thought that William Taft would do exactly what he wanted as president, but Taft proved to be more independent, so Roosevelt was kind of unhappy right away. Here he is, he's trying to bully Taft into doing exactly what he wants. And, like I said, Taft was more independent. He says, nope, you're not the president anymore, I am. And what Roosevelt finally did when he realized he just couldn't bully Taft into submission, he kind of disappeared and he went to Africa and he went to Brazil and he hunted big game and he just sort of disappeared for a couple of years. So here he is in Africa hunting a lion. We kind of look down on people that would do that today because lions are endangered. But back then there were many of them, and here he's hunting a rhinoceros. And again, it's a time when rhinoceros were very plentiful. And here he's hunting an elephant. And again, we would kind of look down on anyone that shot an elephant today because they're endangered. But back then there were plenty of elephants. And, I think this one is probably photoshopped, but if there were dinosaurs at the time, Roosevelt would have been out hunting them. But he spent this time in Africa and in Brazil, kind of hunting, and he actually mapped a river that had never been mapped in Brazil, and he caught these terrible diseases. He almost died there. Then he comes back, and he's unhappy with what President Taft is doing. So he says, no, I'm going to be the president in 1912. I gave you 4 years. You didn't do what I wanted. You're going to move out and I'm going to move into the White House. But of course, Taft was the president, and so he controlled the Republican Party. And so if Roosevelt wanted to run a third time, he was going to have a different party. And so we got the elephant over here, it represents the Republicans. We got the donkey over here, it represents the Democrats. It's a symbol they've always used. He invented something called the Progressive Party, and he used the bull moose as his symbol. So we have a third party in 1912, and it didn't work out for Roosevelt as he would have liked. This idea of the Progressive Party or the Bull Moose Party didn't really fool anyone. Everyone knew it was just solely for Roosevelt and all about Roosevelt. Roosevelt had, kind of a big ego. And so here they're going into the Bull Moose Convention. It's the Roosevelt Convention, and everybody knew that. But here's the way it worked out. The Republican vote, when you divided out Roosevelt's vote, the elephant dividing out the Roosevelt bull moose, what happened is it meant that the Democratic candidate was able to win the election even though he took less than 50% of the vote. Roosevelt and Taft split the other 50%, and so he ended up, handing over the presidency to the Democrats. And after that, Roosevelt kind of faded from the scene. He wasn't the important person that he had been before. It was kind of maybe a little step too far for him. And so we got Humpty Dumpty, he's fallen off the wall, and are they going to be able to put him together again? Well, no. And in the years to come, he just kind of faded from the scene, and he grew old, and he died. But Roosevelt was one character as the president, and he was an important president, and he did important things. And what you're going to do after you finish this PowerPoint is you're going to take the TR quiz in Schoology, TR for Teddy Roosevelt, and just answer the questions as well as you can. And if you need to, open up, open up the Safari browser on your iPad, and do a little bit of Googling if that will help you. So we are done here.